This is the sound of your ride home with Dad after he caught you vaping. Awkward, isn't it? Most vapes contain seriously addictive levels of nicotine and disappointment. Know the real cost of vapes. Brought to you by the FDA.
Hi, park enthusiasts. Delia D'Ambra here. I usually spend my summers with you in the parks, but now I've decided to stay in the parks a little longer. That's right. My podcast, Park Predators, is now a weekly show. Every Tuesday, I'll be taking you into the scenic wilderness to reveal the dark secrets hidden in some of the most beautiful places. We uncover stories from cases that overtook headlines to mysteries still waiting for answers. New episodes drop every Tuesday. Listen to Park Predators now, wherever you get your podcasts.
You can support this podcast at patreon.com/partnersincrimemedia.
I'm Rebecca Lavoie, and this is Crime Writers On. Crime Writers On is the original true crime review podcast that digs into true crime, pop culture, other podcasts. And on this episode, his father was an unrepentant con artist who destroyed his family with his many schemes. Now a stand-up comedian, the host tries to locate him to see if he's changed his ways. We'll talk about the podcast, Number One Dad. Joining me to get that done and more is true crime author, TV journalist, and host of the These Are Their Stories podcast, my husband, and yes, the love of my life, Kevin Flynn. Hello, Kevin.
Hello, Rebecca.
Also with us.
You are number one wife.
Oh, thank you.
I was looking for a coffee mug that said that, and I could not find one, but I did get a wine glass.
Oh, nice.
Which I thought was more appropriate.
Well, I don't know if it's more appropriate, but it's equally appropriate.
I think probably a martini glass would probably be more,
Yeah, it's lovely. Thank you for taking me to the Orville Peck show last night, Kevin. You are really the love of my
Orville
life.
Peck. I became a big fan. Great show. Yeah.
He's awesome. Also with us is private investigator, certified pet detective, resident cat lady, and author of the Piper Green series of cozy mysteries, Laura Bricker. Hello, Laura.
Hello, Rebecca.
And finally with us right now, our resident Doubting Thomas, the author of the City Trilogy of novels, host of Rip Current, Strange Arrivals, our Patreon Deep Dive Book Club podcast host, and Mets fan, Toby Ball. Hello, Toby.
Hello, Rebecca.
All right, so Kevin, what's coming up on Thursday's episode of Crime Writers On?
Well, we got a big week here on Wednesday. We're doing a live show for everybody. We're going to be talking about the season finale of Only Murders in the Building. Now, remember, the final show comes out on Tuesday, and you'll want to get that, and you'll find out who did it. Maybe we'll find out more about who tried to poison the dog, or which of the
plot holes,
of the Pickwick triplets did it, or figure out all of that. And then on Thursday, in your podcast feed, we'll have the audio version of that podcast where we're going to review Only Murders in the Building.
All right, I'm looking forward to that. Before we start talking about the podcast we're talking about, can I just mention something that's wild to see what Toby and Laura think about it?
Sure.
As we tape this, which is not as it's airing, obviously, yesterday was a huge news day in New Hampshire. Not only was a former state senator arrested, but a sitting New Hampshire Supreme Court judge has been indicted. Laura, what do you think about this? This is wild.
Absolutely wild. And a while ago, I had seen the story about her being on leave, and then her husband is a very well-known figure.
Her husband has a grand jury investigation going on.
And her
against
husband's
him.
The port director, and he's been around. His name, I've covered as a journalist the Seacoast. His name is very familiar.
Marconi.
Kind of always up to something. Yeah. And I was like, oh my goodness, that she allegedly called the governor to be like, hey, stop the investigation into my husband, please.
Yes, it's a witch hunt. Do you know what was wild to me about that, Toby, is that there was a grand jury that preceded this indictment. The governor had to have testified in front of this grand jury, right? Because she's basically charged with talking to him. Who else would be able to provide proof of that, right?
Narc.
This is literally the first I've heard of this.
Oh, wow.
But it seems awfully suspicious.
Yes, it is. Kevin, what are your thoughts?
Man, I think
it's juicy, right?
It's super juicy. I do love the former state senator.
We'll talk about that,
who's been arrested because he took pandemic relief money for his business. He runs a sports bar with a charity casino in the basement. And basically he's been arrested for fraud because he took all of his pandemic relief money that he got and bought, was it 2 Ferraris? 3 sports cars, 2 Ferraris and a Lamborghini. Yeah. So, but he was socially distant from everybody, so it all
He probably
works.
wasn't, knowing him.
Well, isn't he the same one that had like either a domestic violence or some sort of
sexual harassment?
I know who you're thinking
I
of.
was trying to say there was a sex case. I mean, so he needed to make up. He needed to make himself feel good after that.
I've known this guy forever. He used to live in the town that I lived in the early 90s. He owned a bike shop that I will never forget. Toby, have you heard of this one?
No.
Andy Sanborn? Okay.
Where's he a senator?
He was a state senator from Bedford. And then moved
that's right.
Anyway.
It's like every third person in New Hampshire's last name is Sanborn.
Yeah. It's wild.
We're a small state, but we hold our weight in corruption.
Take that, New Jersey.
Yeah.
Pound for pound, we're good.
I just think it's amazing that the prosecutor, the attorney general, is basically like, we hold everyone accountable here. And I'm like, no shit, man.
Isn't that Kelly Ayotte?
No, it's John Formella. Oh. And basically what's interesting also is that this Supreme Court justice was a Sununu, current governor appointee. So anyway, there's a lot going on there. I'll be following that story very closely. And if you're interested in checking it out, guys, listeners, check out the NHPR website. Todd Bookman, our reporter at NHPR, has some great reporting on this that he's been doing. All right, Kevin, we have a podcast that we have to talk about. Speaking of...
I was going to remind you of that, yeah.
Yeah, speaking of people who want to pull things over other people's eyes, right? Wool. Mm-hmm. So let's get that done and drop that first clip right now. Leading off.
My dad was a con man in everyday life, but this was just like, to him, just a fun, con that he could do with his son. I love sports. He loved lying. We go, that was his thing. That was, we love comedy. He loves lying.
He's like, you asked him, do you care about the game? He's like, I care about getting in the game. That's what I love.
Comedian Gary Vider had a great childhood story about him and his father sneaking into scores of games at Madison Square Garden, posing as a reporter for Sports Illustrated Kids. But the charming tale belied a deeper truth. Manny Vider was a prolific con artist with a never-ending stream of business scams, insurance fraud, and other schemes that eventually tore his family apart.
He sued Hershey Park, claiming he broke a rib on one of their rides. He did a slip and fall at our hometown movie theater and then took them to court. And he also sued Geico a bunch for what I presume are all false insurance claims.
24 years later, now a father himself, Gary sets out on a quest to locate Manny. His goal is to process the effects of his estranged dad's actions on his life and his family. He also wants to learn whether the unrepentant conman has changed his ways.
Hi, Dad. It's Gary. I know it's been a long time, but I am calling you because I've been thinking a lot about,
Memory full.
Okay. Oh boy, I don't know what that means.
From iHeartMedia and Big Money Players Network comes Number One Dad. Vider talks to relatives, partners, his own therapist, and fellow comedians about Manny's many swindles, both personal and professional. Can he convince his father to meet up and confront their past? And will the son get the truth from a man who spent his life spinning lies? Spoiler alert, we're going to be talking about plot points from Number One Dad. So if you want to remain spoiler-free, go to the estimated time code in our show notes for our thumbs up or thumbs down reviews. Laura Bricker, you grew up running cons for one of your parents, did you not?
Yeah.
Yeah. So did you relate to this in any way?
I totally related to this. Yeah, my mom was a horse dealer. And so I used to go into horse auctions, and my role as a little kid was to sneak around and eavesdrop on people and try to see like which horses were drugged or whatever. But then I also used to do like when the horses were for sale thing, where I'd be like, oh, if there was only one horse that I could keep, it would be this horse. This is the best horse we've ever had. I was like part of the show. And then I'd be like, but I really want you to have it.
Oh, gosh.
Oh,
Laura, you're so
wow.
good at that still.
I think we're going to have Laura do all the Patreon pitches from now on.
Laura, did you have, I have to ask, did you have to deal with like unresolved childhood stuff as a result of all this?
I do.
Yeah.
Yes. I've had 4 therapists in my adult life, and 2 of them have since been passed away.
All right. You keep killing them off. Yeah.
So I can relate to a lot of this. Yes.
Yeah. So, Toby, we tell a lot of stories about people who do things, right? But we've never quite heard it from this perspective.
Yeah, so this is, I kind of thought of this as a Get a Load of My Dad podcast, which is sort of like a Get a Load of This Guy podcast with a side helping of childhood trauma. In other hands, like this could be like the story of like a charming con man and like the crazy stuff he did, or whatever the flip side of that is, like this malevolent guy who's just screwing all these people. But instead, because it's being told from his son, who's been estranged from him for 24 years, from his perspective, between both the stories you hear while he's trying to track him down and then the interactions that he has with them once he finds him, it's a very different perspective. And I think that's, that's the reason for the podcast. And it's also the strength of the podcast is that you get a little bit more of a nuanced idea of who this guy is and sort of the contradictions in his personality and the way he kind of presents himself.
I completely agree. I think the father is somebody that I feel like I've met before, somebody who just does cons to do cons, like wants to get one over all the time, cut the line, break the rules, even in the most benign ways that don't matter. It was a different perspective for me too, to hear somebody who was actually hurt by the person so deeply and also bears some resemblance to him on many moments too, such as his own stealing exams in college and other things that we've heard he's tried to pull off. Very, very interesting there. But Kevin, we do start with the story that Gary has told before in a really popular article about the con that his dad did with him that allowed him to meet athletes like Michael Jordan, get incredible souvenirs, signatures, and basically meet everybody in sports. What did you think about that particular story?
Well, I think in general, this is a pretty unique podcast, although usually when we hear like first person narratives involving interesting yet disturbing stories here, I'm thinking of Murph the Surf and, a whole bunch of other people that were, like Toby coined the genre of the Get a Load of This Guy. But, this begins with a tale that, is kind of genuinely charming and funny, right? When this was revealed later, all these news outlets were like, oh, wow, this is great. And the way he tells it doesn't belie that, sort of below the surface, there's something more serious here. Because I think like the Sports Illustrated kid story could have been like on the Moth or something like that.
Yeah.
And in a way, you're almost kind of like, oh, that dad is like willing to use his superpower to do something great for his kid that like no other dad could do. And all of that is true. But it's not like until like later when Gary kind of digs into it and find out like, no, this just wasn't like this really clever way of talking your way into the movie theater or something like that. This was a pattern that was actually pretty destructive, especially, it wasn't like a one-off thing. His whole life was this, and it, affected the marriage and the family life and what it did to the kids. And so that's kind of like how like we're already sort of drawn in because of this interesting story. But like, even though this is sort of like the mildest and most charming scam in a lifetime of bad actions and painful consequences,
And this is how crazy my dad is. Not only did we go into both locker rooms after the game, we went to the team after party. And a few days later, the team celebrated at Gracie Mansion, which is where the mayor lives, who at the time was Rudy Giuliani. And my dad didn't care about this. He was like, let's go in there. Let's get past the security detail.
Toby, we do hear about this very charming scam, which I'd love your input on because I'm calling it very charming in quotes because I actually felt really bad for young Gary having to tell this lie. And like, I know how that would feel as a child. And he did it like all the time. But we hear about that and then the transition into like how his dad actually made a living. But I'd love to hear your take on the sports scam and then on how we learn about how his dad actually was operating his life.
It's hard to put yourself in his position because I think most of us were raised with the idea that you're supposed to tell the truth and be honest and things like that. And that clearly was not part of his upbringing, at least from his father's side.
Yeah.
But it's disturbing to think that like a young kid, like his sort of, this is the way the world works, education is like, look how easy it is to screw people. And not only am I going to demonstrate it, but I'm going to co-opt you into it. And you're going to both do it and reap the rewards of it. So the fact that, Gary turns out to not be a sociopath is probably a credit to his sort of inborn moral character or something.
And the quality of therapist that he's using. Yeah.
Yeah. And you were saying this earlier, he's just nonstop scammer, right? I mean, he does it for little things. He does it for big things. He like seeing like what it is actually like for a con man to make a living when that's literally he just has his cons, and you see him go through these different things like the con he has with payphones, the con
Which could have been a real business, and he just chose not to have it be one.
When my sister and I would be on the job with my dad, it wasn't your normal experience of going to work with your parent.
He'd give me gum. So, here, you're a kid, you're getting gum. Like, awesome. Then he stops the car and he says, oh, you see that payphone over there? The gum I just gave you, I want you to take that gum and stick it in the coin slot.
Same thing with the furniture business where he lies and says he's supplying furniture to embassies. And then, I guess we'll probably talk about this later, but this whole thing where he's going to provide furniture for a sex club, a high-end sex club. Why are we suddenly like in these podcasts that have like high-end sex aspects to them?
And mobbed up people,
I don't know, mattresses on the floor doesn't sound like a high-end.
Well, you should see the low-end ones, Kevin.
Oh, jeez. Futons, yes.
From IKEA.
It's just a couple of grubby bathrooms. So
Toby sounds like he knows.
Yeah, so I thought that part was interesting too, because you kind of hear about these things like, oh, this guy was like a career con man or whatever, but it's like, what does that actually look like? Like, how do you make a living from being a con man? Like, how does that work? And at least you get a pretty good sense of this guy's idea.
What was interesting to me, Laura, was that, there's this big family dynamic undercurrent in this podcast. And one of the interesting facts that comes out is that Gary hasn't spoken to his sister for 6 years. Because she tried to do exactly what he's trying to do right now. And she is so fucking nice about it. And I would be like, what the fuck? Like, you didn't speak to me for 6 years and now you're making a podcast about it. So it's supposed to be okay that you're doing it? Like, she was much nicer than I would have been about it.
Well, I'm making money.
That's true.
You were doing it for free.
I have some issues with the making money part of this a little bit.
Tell me.
Well, I feel like what's interesting about this is that the roles are a little bit reversed here. And that Gary is making money off his father the way that his father used to make money off of him.
Interesting.
And the part where I kind of started to feel like, is this another con? Are they in this together so they can make money? When they were having like the scene at the deli and like he's recording his father. And at that point, his father doesn't know he's doing a podcast, doesn't know he's being recorded. And I was like, what's up here?
I have no regrets.
You have no regrets. Well, that's all in anything.
Well,
obviously, I haven't talked to you in 20 some odd years.
Yeah,
I'm not talking to Jamie or Danny.
Well, I tried. Things happen, and that's it.
I mean, hello, I can't say I haven't thought about telling my life story and making money off of it, but I also am like very cognizant of when is the time for that, right? But yeah, I did feel a little bit like there was a little role reversal there. And I can't believe I'm admitting this. I started to feel a little bad for the dad because he sounded really sincere in a couple of these scenes. And I felt like, okay, I know Gary's trying to put this unresolved
He was conning you, Laura.
Oh my God.
I don't think so though. I mean, I don't know. Like the first thing Gary wanted when he got in the house was the hockey stick.
Dude, his father still scammed when his son bought legitimate tickets to see the Rangers at Madison Square Garden. His dad pulled a scam on tape in front of us to get into the VIP thing. Like,
well, hey, I mean, I can't say I haven't tried to get in the VIP thing, so maybe I have a little more scammer in me than I ever knew.
He did a thing to jump the line when there was 5 people in the line.
I know, for no reason.
Just because he has to.
Just because he could. Yeah. And he brought in a switchblade because he could.
The object my dad pulled out of his pocket was a 6-inch switchblade. The whole time he was going in and out of the metal detector and talking with security confused them enough. They completely missed the knife.
See, look at this. Oh, shit. Yeah, you can't go out and play with that. No.
One of the things that frustrated me was like we would hear the interactions between Gary and his dad. And this is just maybe a stage of where he was at in his own personal growth in this area. He would kind of flip back into that same sort of dynamic as a child, but then he would do the reflective thing where he'd like trash his dad right after. And I'm like, I want you to say that's your dad's face because I'm kind of wondering what's the fallout from this now because you didn't say any of this to his face.
His dad probably loves it. I'm sorry. I think his dad probably loves it because it's about him.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
What did you think, Kevin?
Well, the original question was, and I just want to step in on this, is like what do you think Danielle's reaction is after like Gary says, well, I haven't talked to you in years, but now you're like, you won't believe, like I've been to the house and I've been, we went to the deli and then we went to a hockey game together and I met my half-sister or whatever.
In France.
In France, That was a dropped plot line. I think that we should have gotten a tidbit on like what the reaction was from the rest of the family, the mom and everything like that.
Talk about the mom. Yeah. That just talk about a dropped plot line, a dropped something, right?
Oh, a dropped fork.
Yes.
I think that's the best audio moment I've heard in a long time. Talking to mom, can we do this? And the answer is a dropped fork.
Yeah.
And I immediately heard that and saw it. Right, because I think what he does is a really great job of showing and not telling.
Good news, I sold a podcast to iHeartMedia. But there is a catch. It's about my father.
I'm getting the impression that his own mother would not sign the release form to be in the podcast because we don't even hear her cough. We just hear her fucking fork, right? But he does a great job of expressing his interiority and his feelings about his father. And instead of it just being narration, he has these excellent passages with his wife and his friends and his friend, the comedian who's blowing up, Nate Bargatze, and his therapist. I mean, all this great stuff. And it never sort of feels like deeply cry on the couch, introspective, doing the work that way. But it does give him an opportunity to sort of unburden himself and make these observations that we wouldn't hear exclusively from narration. So they're candid and vulnerable. But sometimes, another writer would be like, and then I was really afraid about what I might find out. And, and it's just, he's talking with someone who can kind of process it with him. So we're processing it along with him. And I think that makes it more authentic.
Well, you know what will make you cry on the couch, Kevin?
What?
Joining our Patreon.
Oh, fuck.
Yeah. So, Kevin, what do we have on our Patreon? Let's talk about the business section real quick.
Okay. So on our Patreon, if you go to patreon.com/Partners in Crime Media, you can sustain this podcast, keep us going month after month with just a small membership. If you do so at the leading off level for $5 a month, this is all the stuff you get. You get the Crime Writers on after the show. You get to your Toby Ball's Deep Dive Book Club podcast, Married with Podcast, and Rebecca's Readathon, Karen Reed Trial podcast. And if you join us as
Karen Reed Trial / Corruption in Massachusetts podcast.
Oh my God, this just could be like 5 podcasts a week on that. And it could be the daily, but not behind a Well, I guess behind a paywall, but all right, whatever. If you join us at the Bricker scale level, you get an additional podcast. That's Laura Bricker's Leave It to Bricker podcast. Also, if you support us at the Let's Do What We Do level, you get episodes of Crime Writers on early and ad-free. You'd already know what our review is of Number One Dad. If you're a deep diver, not only can you get all of those other things, you can watch and take part in the recording of Toby's Deep Dive Book Club podcast. Get in on the chat, find out what your own thoughts are on the book. Toby's guests for the upcoming recording on November 6th are Julia Lowry Henderson, Janet Varney, and Sarah Krasnostein. Toby, what's the book that you're going to be discussing?
It's called The Sullivanians, and it's about a psychoanalysis cult in New York. This started in the 70s and went through the early 90s.
So like I said, the Patreon really helps us continue to do all this exclusive stuff, and it lets us, well, I don't want to say, it feels like after hearing about Gary's dad, it feels a little bit like you let us do this and we can sneak into the VIP.
No, they're supporting our actual work. We're not scamming anyone. We're so transparent. We're like, this is what we do for you. We ask you to pay for it, and then that money actually incentivizes us to make this podcast. Otherwise, we'd be doing it for free. So thank you for supporting our work. We're very transparent.
Yeah, that's it.
Thank you for supporting our work and letting me go to a Sasquatch festival.
Yes.
You didn't pay for Laura's trip to the Sasquatch festival.
No,
she has another job. I have
another job, but
there's so many other ways to scam getting into that Sasquatch calling festival that it's just unfortunate that we didn't listen to this podcast sooner.
Absolutely. All right, so Kevin, does that do it for our business section?
Yeah, thus ends the business section.
I'm going to go ahead and fade that music out right now. So Kevin, who's our next sponsor right now?
We're sponsored by Quince.
Oh boy.
So we are kind of officially out of summer, we're into autumn, and now it's time to switch things up, move into a new season. And I think, we got to look right past Halloween. You got to start thinking about Thanksgiving and Christmas and cooler, crisper weather.
Yeah.
And that means you got to get your cashmere sweater from Quince, priced from $50.
Yes.
And Rebecca, have you been keeping them afloat with all of your sweaters you've been buying from Quince?
I've got a couple bookmarked right now, Kevin. Right now, my favorite is this very cute kind of cropped, sort of quasi off the shoulder one. It comes in a color called I think it's called strawberry cream. It also comes in a color called moss. And what's held me back, the only thing that's held me back is it wasn't the price, was which one to get. I love Quince so much. The quality of their cashmere for the price is incredible.
Well, I was going to say that, like, you know, if you could just get all of them, maybe you should.
Well, thanks.
I'm thinking twice about that right now, actually. So, switching seasons is a breeze with Quince's high-quality closet essentials.
Just go to quince.com/crime for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns.
Mm-hmm.
That's QUINCE.com/crime to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/crime. So, Kevin, who's the next sponsor for this podcast?
Hey, we're sponsored by Babbel.
Amazing.
Are you holding back on your travel plans this holiday because you're afraid of the language gap? Well, no need to mind the gap if you have Babbel. So, you know that sometimes when we can, in the winter holidays, we like to take a long weekend to Montreal.
Yes.
And we've kind of been reluctant to go farther north up to Quebec City.
Yes.
Because you really do have, unlike Montreal where you can get away, there's a lot of people that speak both French and English. You really got to rely on your French.
A little more,
if you're going a little up there, all right? And so there are times when I've tried to speak French to people.
Yes.
And it has gone terribly wrong.
Sure has.
With just these 10-minute lessons in a couple of weeks, I've been, I think, improving my French.
Really?
Yeah. So I'm going to be able to Jay-Z, which is to chat with folks. I also learned what was really important is that European French differs from Canadian French.
Sure does.
You know, the French we learned in high school, like if you wanted to go to the convenience store, you would ask, où est l'épicerie?
Okay.
But if you're in Quebec, what you actually want to do is you want to ask, où est le dépanneur?
Okay.
See, so it's different. All right, so I'm still working on the accent and everything, but this is great. You have some holiday plans and you're going away. Babbel's a good way to get started.
Amazing. Here's a special holiday deal for our listeners. Right now, get up to 60% off your Babbel subscription, but only for Crime Writers On listeners at babbel.com/crime writers.
Crime Writers.
Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/crime writers.
Crime Writers.
Spelled BABBEL.com/crime writers.
Crime Writers.
Rules and restrictions may apply.
There are some cases so infamous that we have all heard about them. But some of the coldest cases, the most mysterious, are the ones that you've never heard of before. I'm Ashley Flowers, and every Wednesday on my show, The Deck, I dive into the coldest of cold cases. Many of these victims didn't get the press coverage they deserved during the initial investigations, but I'm sharing what our reporting team has found on these stories in hopes that someone listening may have the information needed to bring answers to light. And that listener could be you. Listen to The Deck now wherever you get your podcasts.
Everybody sleeps, but no two people sleep alike. At Coop Sleep Goods, we celebrate the way you sleep differently. We believe everyone deserves a great night's sleep with their own pillow. And the adjustable, customizable Coop pillow makes it easy. Whether you're a side sleeper, back sleeper, or even a starfish, we've got the perfect pillow for you. Crafted with our innovative memory foam and microfiber fill, our hypoallergenic pillows adjust to you, not the other way around. Just tailor the fill for the perfect fit. Add some in, take some out, until your pillow's just right for you. See why luxury hotels and spas worldwide feature Coop Sleep Goods and why we have tens of thousands of 5-star reviews. With our 100-night risk-free trial, you've got nothing to lose. Except those sleepless nights. Get 25% off your first order when you visit coopsleepgoods.com/comedy. That's COOP sleepgoods.com/comedy.
So, Toby, something that I mentioned earlier is that, you know, Gary inherited some of his dad's scammy traits, and we actually hear him do a couple of scammy things on the podcast in real time. Like having his friend order a pizza and be the delivery guy, showing up at the door instead of just, I don't know, fucking knocking on the door.
Or looking in the assessor's property database.
Yeah, that's a legitimate, like, I mean,
this
that's
is way
how
more
I find
fun for a
live.
podcast.
Yeah. So,
what does Toby think?
Yeah, what do you think about listening to him be a scammer in some ways?
Well, you can just tell he's good at it because it's like, first of all, he's got like the cover, which is delivering a pizza. But then he's like, but I don't want to deliver it to the actual house where he is. I want to deliver it to another house and pretend that I'm lost so I can find out more about that house, which is something that I don't think would occur to me. Maybe it would occur to other more devious people. But it clearly, like, that's just the way his mind works. And I assume a lot of that's like nurture. You know, he talks about he stole tests when he was in college and sold them.
It wasn't like Gary stole the idea from Manny. It's just
they
that
both came
Manny
up with it. Yeah.
They both came up with it. Yeah.
His dad's method for stealing exams was actually pretty smart.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think Gary's was much better.
He didn't just steal the exams. Then he had other people do the exam.
Right.
So that he could know the answers for the exam. And then he'd be like, you didn't catch me cheating. We just happen to have the same answers. Amazing. Amazing.
Yeah. So anyway, I mean, you can kind of tell where, like, even though Gary didn't follow his father into a life of conning people, you know, I think some of those lessons were definitely learned and just sort of an outlook, or at least an approach that he got there.
So, Laura, New York does have a one-party consent law, which he also fully takes advantage of while making this podcast. Again, sort of revealing a length he's willing to go to get what he needs, right? What did you think about that?
I know that it's the law. It just gave me a little bit of an ick factor, though, at times. You know, especially in that deli scene, I was like, oh my God, like this whole conversation is happening and he's recording this whole entire conversation. But then I'm like, his dad would probably do the same thing, quite honestly.
100%.
So, you know, what's fair is fair in the family of cons. But I would love to be able to record people all the time. So I'm a little envious, actually, because
we can't do it here.
No, I have to be like, do you mind if I record you?
Exactly.
For my podcast that I'm making?
They'll let you if they can just say at first, everything I'm saying is bullshit. So you can't use it against me.
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Did you steal the evidence? I'm not going to say I did that. So, Toby, what's interesting is that, you know, we actually meet Manny in an extended scene with his son. His son interviews him on tape. And there's this sort of duality there where Manny consistently talks about how proud he is of Gary for all he's accomplished. He brags about him to everybody, right? But then it's actually not really about Gary, right?
Yeah. There's basically 3 episodes full of this, right? And that makes it sound worse than it actually is, because I thought they were basically pretty interesting, partly because you're just getting Manny kind of unfiltered, just kind of going about his business, having conversations with both Gary and with other people and just seeing him kind of do his thing. But yeah, I mean, it's the thing with the con man. It's like you just never know when he's being sincere or whatever. But the one thing that seems to be constantly there is some form of either self-aggrandizement or getting one over on people. So
we're saying things aren't my fault.
Right. Yeah. So even when he's bragging about Gary to these like bros who they're sitting next to at Madison Square Garden, he's sort of basking. It's like, oh, your son is like, you know, he's enjoying that.
My dad's mic was still rolling, and he couldn't help himself from boasting about me to the 2 finance guys I told him to leave alone. If I'm being honest, it was nice to hear.
He has a show in Vegas, Comedy Cellar. Gary Vider. Google him and do AGT, America's Got Talent.
And when they're talking about sort of the troubles that the family has, he like sort of pictures it as like all my kids independently came to the idea that they wanted to cut off from me rather than me doing something that would cause them to do that. He brings up these things about like, did your mom like let you know that I was, you know, sending money for you or whatever? And Gary's like, what? And like, he'll be saying all this stuff and you just know that it's possible that it's true, but there's no reason to believe him. Like he's a con man. But you also get to see in these episodes his charisma, right? Like you get to see like how he could draw people in. He is the kind of guy that if you met him at like an airport bar and you're just like, I've got 45 minutes to kill before my flight leaves, and you're sitting next to him, it's going to be an entertaining time. You want to keep your hand on your wallet.
Yes.
Yeah. You don't want to sit next to him on the plane for 6 hours.
But he's going to show you the pictures of himself with the past 3 presidents.
Yeah. I mean, it's just going to be one of those things where you can get back and be like, you'll never believe this freaking guy I ran into at the airport. We were just sitting around talking. He's got all these pictures of these presidents. His son's a comedian. You know, he did all this stuff and, you know.
He killed the Pope.
Yeah, exactly. Killed the Pope. He saw death on an airplane crashing into his neighborhood.
Oh, callback. So there's 2 things there, and I agree with Toby. One is like those final 3 episodes. For some reason, it felt unbalanced. There's nothing wrong with them. I think what it is that the story's hit its climax, right? Which is that Gary connects with Manny. So we fulfilled that, and everything else that sort of comes after it, all that other action for 3 episodes. For some reason, it was ill fit, and I can't quite place my finger on it or what the script doctoring would be, that you'd have one massive episode afterward. I don't know. I'll just say that it kind of felt, for what everything had been before, that part kind of felt off for me. But ending the story at the hockey game was perfect, because you're right, so much was revealed that we touched on. First, Manny still insisting on pulling some low-level scam just to cut the line or to sneak into something, and then fuck with security just so he can bring in a switchblade into Madison Square Garden so he could show off, and later when he's on the subway, he'll poke somebody in the eye with it. Who knows? We also hear Gary call his buddy, one of the comedians that we heard from earlier, to kind of get like this real-time gut check of how it's going.
Just try and enjoy it for what it's worth.
But it's got to be tough. I mean, there's a reason people that actually fought in the Civil War didn't do Civil War reenactments. I mean, it's like, this is your actual life, and you're just trying to recreate it into something that was better and more healthy.
Right.
So again, like this idea of it was really showing instead of just telling. And we continue to come up, like, as listeners, trying to like figure out, is this legit? How much is legit? How much isn't? And, he comes back later and he finds out, when he hears like how his dad was sort of bragging about him, some of it seems really nice, like a dad would brag, but also, like you point out, nothing's like really what it seems with Manny. And like, yeah, as somebody who's like always sort of thinking of himself and trying to get one up, it was more than just altruistic and parental pride to talk about his kid to get, which is not to say
it's to make himself look better.
Right. It's not to say that if Gary grew up to be an accountant, that he wouldn't be proud of his son, but would he bring it up and try to make a conversation about it with two finance bros? So we're still left to wonder whether it's sincere pride or part of, Manny's relentless, pointless bullshit.
There's a couple of things that I want to say about Manny. One is his recall for detail is incredible for somebody who lies all the time. Mm-hmm. Like, it's very hard for liars to remember details of things because they often don't remember what they lied about and what they told the truth about. So they'll tell you a story back and you'll be like, no, that's not exactly right. Like, I have an example of this. I have a parent that I'm estranged from who has a very hard time, or had a very hard time when he was younger even, recalling details of things because he was always very self-aggrandizing, very narcissistic, like put himself as the main character. Mm-hmm. I understood so much more about my father listening to this podcast because I realized that I have all these legends about my dad that he told when we were kids. And I realize now they probably weren't true, or they were true to him, but not true to the other person. Like, I'm friends with this famous person. I did this with this well-known person. I achieved this. I achieved that. And it's like, maybe, I don't know. I think maybe
he's really not buddies with Peter Gabriel.
You took a kernel of something that happened, an interaction, and you made it that you're friends. Like that's sort of, and I was just like, wow, this all. So I called my sister and I was like, what do you think of this? I'm listening to this podcast where this guy did whatever. And she was like, do you remember that dad used to say he was good friends with Arlo Guthrie? And I was like, oh my God, I completely forgot about that one. But yes, he would do this all the time. And it was like, it wasn't to get things.
You and Gary need to have coffee.
It was to have other people have a different impression of you than what is true. But the difference here is that Gary's dad is very proud of the details of his scams. He still thinks the phone thing was a great fucking idea. He still thinks all of these things were just, they were good ideas. And to be fair, some of them were pretty good ideas, like on paper, but like illegal. And,
Sports Illustrated Kids was brilliant.
It was pretty smart until they ran into the real Sports Illustrated.
Sports Illustrated for kids, not by kids, which was the crucial distinction.
Exactly. So what do you think about, because the gut checks that we hear, Laura, are that, Gary kind of gets pulled in a little bit like I always got pulled in by my dad's BS stories. And then he does have these conversations where his friends are like, whoa. What were your thoughts sort of about that contrast?
Yeah, no, I can relate to that as well. So it's definitely, listening to that, I liked that scene where he called when they were at the game, and I thought it was his friend, whoever it was like, yeah, he can't resist it. He has to scratch the itch. And then they kind of laughed about it, but then he kind of like validated to Gary, like, this is who he's always going to be. Like, he's not going to change. This is who he is. And this is just part of his makeup and his DNA and his character. But I think when you are used to having a parent that does things that are not within the norms, you normalize that because that's how you have to function.
Yeah. Part
of going through him trying to process his childhood is having outside people being like, yeah, that was pretty fucked up. I mean, like when I tell people, my friends about my childhood, they're like, how are you so normal? I'm like, I like that you think I'm normal. But as a child in that environment, this is what you know. This is what you become accustomed to. This is how you function. And you don't realize, and at some point Gary does, but it's like, that's what you have come to see as the normal of the family dynamic. So having people that realize like, hey, that's not a normal family dynamic, and continuing to say that to you is really, I think, helpful in the process of healing and the process of moving forward and, putting this into a place in life where he isn't feeling like this is some unresolved thing that I need to work through. And having that outside validation to get there is really helpful.
It also really informs Gary's career choice because he became very funny because he's coping with this shit with his dad. It's very clear. Like when his friend or producer asks, like, what's the worst thing that you think is going to happen with your dad? And he's like, oh, he could slip me the tongue, right? It's like, oh my God, like this is what shaped you. Like deflection, like coping, like being a personality. This is what you had to become in order to be able to joke about a thing that like hurts a lot. Because at the same time, we hear him trying to be a different kind of parent, which is, also difficult when you didn't have great parents growing up.
This is how I became a super spy. This is how I became nosy.
You're going to do that pizza scam or that ruse. It's a good technique. You just need to get the, whatever the pizza delivery bag. Yeah. And go to, you want to find out who's in the neighborhood. Knock next door and say, I'm looking for Mr. Smith. Is this the right place? Oh, no, he lives next door?
I could do it. I don't even need the pizza. I often knock on the next door and I go, hey, do you know the people who live over there? I'm looking for them. Or,
nice. Are people cooperative when you do that?
People are always nice for the most part when I go to their doors.
Nice.
Hi, park enthusiasts. Delia D'Ambra here. I usually spend my summers with you in the parks, but now I've decided to stay in the parks a little longer. That's right. My podcast, Park Predators, is now a weekly show. Every Tuesday, I'll be taking you into the scenic wilderness to reveal the dark secrets hidden in some of the most beautiful places. We uncover stories from cases that overtook headlines to mysteries still waiting for answers. New episodes drop every Tuesday. Listen to Park Predators now, wherever you get your podcasts.
Everybody sleeps, but no two people sleep alike. At Coop Sleep Goods, we celebrate the way you sleep differently. We believe everyone deserves a great night's sleep with their own pillow. And the adjustable, customizable Coop pillow makes it easy. Whether you're a side sleeper, back sleeper, or even a starfish, we've got the perfect pillow for you. Crafted with our innovative memory foam and microfiber fill, our hypoallergenic pillows adjust to you, not the other way around. Just tailor the fill for the perfect fit. Add some in, take some out, until your pillow's just right for you. See why luxury hotels and spas worldwide feature Coop Sleep Goods and why we have tens of thousands of 5-star reviews. With our 100-night risk-free trial, you've got nothing to lose, except those sleepless nights. Get 25% off your first order when you visit coopsleepgoods.com/comedy. That's COOP sleepgoods.com/comedy.
Everywhere you look, things are getting more expensive. So at Consumer Cellular, we're lowering the price for those 50 and up. Now you can get unlimited talk, text, and data for $30 a line when you buy 2. That's just $60 a month for 2 unlimited lines. So if you're 50 and up, make the switch and save. Come on, you've earned this. Call 1-888-FREEDOM or visit consumercellular.com today. Requires 2 lines of service, age validation, and credit approval, subject to system and area limits, taxes, and other fees apply.
In the market for investment-worthy bags, watches, and fine jewelry? Rebag is the answer. Rebag is a luxury resale platform where each piece is carefully inspected by experts to ensure quality and authenticity. Use Rebag to buy and sell finds from the world's top brands, including Hermes, Chanel, and Cartier. Head to Rebag.com to get 10% off your first purchase with code REBAG10.
All right, let's do what we do. Let's let our listeners know, should they check out the podcast Number One Dad? Laura Bricker, what do you think? Thumbs up or thumbs down for Number One Dad?
I'm going to go mild thumbs up with this. I thought this was really unique in terms of the type of podcasts and the type of stories that we listen to. Gary is very engaging and funny, and he's a good storyteller. And this is a really interesting look at how he landed where he did in his life based on his upbringing with his father, and then reaching a point in his adult life where it's time to kind of have a reckoning with that and go back. And I related to a lot of this as somebody who has a very complicated relationship with both of my parents. I could relate to a lot of this. I think the reason I'm not a full thumbs up is I felt like, this went on too long. Like I was listening to this on my way to New Jersey last week. We got through a lot of the story and then I looked it up and I looked at the topics of the upcoming episodes and I was like, so what's going to be different about these? Because they were like 3 of the same topics. And I felt like at that point, maybe some editing and finessing of the story would have made this a better ending for me. So mild thumbs up.
Toby Ball, thumbs up or thumbs down for number 1 dad?
So I'm better than a mild thumbs up. I'm like a pretty solid thumbs up, but I think Laura kind of hits on why I wouldn't be like a huge thumbs up in that there does feel, and I think Kevin in the main review, I think used the right terminology when he said like the balance wasn't quite right. I'll just leave it at that for that part of it. I think it is very, as far as like sort of con man type shows that we've watched or listened to, I think this is the most sort of psychologically insightful one that we've done, which to me, I really liked that. I thought that was really the strength of it. And I think also the fact that you're hearing about this from the son of this con man and you're getting a sense of both what it's like to be a con man, but also like what it's like to be the child of a con man, like when you're growing up and how that all works. So I think if it wasn't for this balance issue, I think I'd be a very strong thumbs up. And I don't really know what the remedy for that issue is, but yeah, I recommend it. I came away, I felt with a much better understanding of con men and the people who love them or whatever, than I had gotten from any other thing that we've done. And that in and of itself, I think warrants a pretty strong thumbs up.
That sounds like a new reality show, Con Men and the People Who Love Them.
Kevin Flynn.
I think it's probably on Discovery.
Yeah, probably.
Or Lifetime. Yeah, I'm a solid thumbs up too. I thought this was pretty unique. I would say that like you could even just listen to episode 1 and really get a very interesting, complete story. That's not to say don't listen to the rest of it, but I thought that, that was a pretty unique story. We've got a very enjoyable storyteller here in our main host. You're really pulling for him. It's a much lighter side of things like The Ballad of Billy Balls or Disorganized Crime or The Sneak seasons 1 or season 2, because, again, you've got like this familial connection. And you're really going to be challenged to come to your own conclusions about Manny Vider. And this guy was unrepentant during Gary's childhood. Is it possible to change? Would you want to change? What do you want to see when you have a person like that in your life that did you so much harm? Do you want to forgive? Are you just trying to process? But also done with a very light touch, a little bit of comedy. And, I think it's overall, it's a really interesting podcast to listen to. So a solid thumbs up from me.
Yeah, this is a very solid thumbs up for me too. I really enjoyed it and I found it to be very insightful. My remedy would be that, I love the transparency of the podcast that, he tells us right up front that he sold the story to like iHeart. And I know that, that some networks require a certain number of episodes, and that's why this one was as many as it was. But the remedy for even making those last ones better is to cut the tape into shorter bites. It would have been really, really helpful because there were some moments that were so punchy that I just felt like took forever to get to because we heard basically whole cloth conversations, and whole cloth conversations are very interesting to the person who had them, less interesting to the people listening in on them. Like get to the juicy stuff, summarize the other bits that happen. And I just felt like there was too much of that. And as a result, the climax and denouement went on way too long. And that is where the imbalance lies. I also have a couple of important unanswered questions that I wish he had circled back to in the podcast. I actually think that could have been episode 10, would have been like a Fallout episode. That really is my complaint though, because otherwise I found this to be incredibly creative, really innovative. And it's the first thing in a long time that's felt like you're really riding in a sidecar with the host as he's doing a thing. And it's hard to do that well and not have it be either really bad or really cheesy or really like telling us like a lot of shit we don't need to know, like what you're wearing or whatever. And this hits that balance really well. I found myself like feeling a lot of suspense at some moments in the podcast. So yeah, big thumbs up for me for number 1 dad. Now it's time for my favorite part of the podcast, a little something I like to call the Crime of the Week.
Crime of the Week!
One computer programmer hit a sour note with Spotify after they learned he created hundreds of thousands of AI-generated songs, then used an army of bots to stream those songs to earn royalties. Spotify does have tech to root out fakes, but Michael Smith stayed one step ahead of them by randomly changing artist and song titles. His computer-generated songs and computer-generated listeners got him more than, wait for it, 661,000 streams a day. The licensing group that handles royalties thought something was wrong when they noticed billions of streams from a guy nobody had heard of. The U.S. attorney has indicted Smith for wire fraud and money laundering. He faces up to 20 years in prison for each charge if convicted. So Laura Bricker, what do you think is the new hit song from this AI musician to hit the charts?
Thanks for funding my house in Fiji. I don't know. But hey, that's pretty inventive and a great crime of the week for this particular podcast that we just reviewed.
Absolutely. Toby Ball, what do you think the new hit song is from this AI musician to hit the charts?
So I guess my first question is, is there something wrong with doing that? Like, I don't get what...
It's gaming Spotify in order to get their monetization. And so
but
basically...
people are listening to your thing, right? Like, you're just making...
But no listeners. People. They had bots just pinging the...
Got it.
Yeah.
Right. That's what I missed.
Yes. Like those people who approach you on LinkedIn, Toby, and say, if you pay me $1,000, I'll guarantee you 100,000 listens on Apple Podcasts.
Yeah,
that's what they're offering.
I paid a lot of those people, and I still only have 45 reviews. Yeah, I don't know. Like, Hey Dude by the Beatles.
The Beatles, yeah.
What do you think, Kevin?
Yeah, do a little dance, make a little love, get downloads tonight.
Oh, very, very good. That's going to do it for us. Laura Bricker, if folks want to find you on social media, how can you be found there?
At Laura Bricker on Twitter and Instagram.
What about you, Toby Ball? How can you be found?
You can find me at TobyBallNH on Twitter and TikTok, and at TobyBall603 on Instagram.
What about you, Kevin?
I can be found at Kevin P. Flynn.
That's right. You should also follow the social media for this show at Crime Writers On, and you should follow the social media for These Are Their Stories, because it's really good content that Kevin's making, and you can watch it, share it, all that stuff. I encourage you mostly, though, to join our incredible Facebook group. Folks there are rad. You'll make friends. You'll find people to meet up with. There was recently just a meetup of people in our group from Australia. Mm-hmm. Incredible. Get episodes early and ad-free at patreon.com/Partners in Crime Media. You'll also get the Crime Writers On After Show, Married with Podcast, Laura Bricker's Leave It to Bricker podcast, and Toby Ball's Deep Dive Book Club podcasts. Our theme song was composed and performed by Tyler Gibbons. Our editor is the wonderful Livy Burdett. The executive producer of this show is Kevin. This show is recorded in Studio C, the closet in our New Hampshire basement, where we also instruct our children to vandalize our competitors' payphones. On behalf of all the Crime Writers, thanks so much for listening. We'll catch you later.
Later.
Hey, what are we doing for the after show this time?
We did the AI thing in the New York Times paywall.
Oh.
Do you have something you wanted to do?
No.
Okay.
I just wanted to mentally prepare myself for whatever we're going to be talking about.
Hey, I'm Yara Shahidi, and I'm the host of The Optimist Project. This is the podcast that asks, what gives you hope? Each week, I sit down with changemakers you may or may not know, from comedy, music, academia, and more, to uncover what inspires them to create a better tomorrow. Join us as we find out ways that we can cultivate optimism in our own lives. You can find The Optimist Project wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to follow the show so you never miss an episode.